Hi everybody, welcome to the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. It's 3 o'clock on a rather murky Tuesday here in downtown Providence. I'm your GoLocal Live host, Rachel Nunes. We're here with our first guest, Leigh Reposa. She's here from the Rhode Island Student Assistance Services. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us back.
So, last week we did a pre-back to school talk with talking about teen dating violence. Now, again, we don't really want it to be back to school, but it's coming up fast. So ahead of back to school, we want to talk a little bit about what are some of the services that are available to students. What do you guys do?
Yeah, so Rhode Island Student Assistance Services, so this is a timely topic. I'm hoping that there are some parents that are listening and working towards supporting their child or children as they re-enter school, or even possibly are starting school or going to a new environment, a different school. So there are a number of resources that are in schools for student social support, student supports. Some of those are our student assistance program. So Rhode Island Student Assistance Service has been around for about a little over 30 years. And we are a group of master's level clinicians or master's level social workers, and sometimes other fields, mental health professionals. And we're in schools to offer support to students. It's a confidential support. Maybe a student is coming from a using or abusing family. Maybe they themselves have started using or abusing drugs or alcohol. Sometimes there's actually support groups for kids who might have a number of different things in common that they're experiencing during adolescence. So we're in the middle schools and the high schools. So we're called the student assistance counselors. If you actually want to look up within your school system who those folks are, maybe their schedules, how you can contact them. But I would definitely make sure that students are aware that that's a resource. And then there's a number of other resources that I think we'll probably talk about as we have this conversation that parents should be familiar with, as well as your students.
And so are you in all public schools, in all schools in this state? How can
That's a
students
great
find
question.
you?
So we're actually not in every school district. We always hope that we'll be expanding at some point statewide, but right now we are in a number of different school districts. If you wanted to, actually, I could name them all, but it'll probably take a couple minutes. So we are, and we cover different parts of the state for sure, but we might not necessarily be in your school, but we might be in your school, a neighboring school district. So you could actually just go to your school's website and look to see what the student support services are. Typically the social worker, guidance counselors, school psychologists, and then from there you can actually see if you have a student assistance counselor. Or you can actually just always email me or go to our website, www.risas.org, or you can email me at lreposa@risas.org, and I can actually let you know if you have a student assistance counselor available.
And so why are student assistant counselors so important? Why is it important to have this resource available to young people?
Yeah, I think more often than not, there are students who might be coming from a family system or have had experience with their friends or peers, or maybe even a sibling who has started to use drugs and alcohol, and it's really hard to kind of navigate that obviously on your own, and maybe they are actually not having an experience where they're getting support in their community or maybe even at home. So this is a confidential resource that students can go to for support. And a lot of times this is what we really do best, is information. So there might be information that students think is true, but then we can go back and actually let them know that vaping is actually worse than the historical nicotine delivery system of cigarettes, when there might be a perception out there that it's actually safer. So a lot of times students might think that they know all the facts, but this is a safe way for them to actually get the information that they need to make responsible, healthy decisions.
And so you said you're located in middle schools and high schools across the state. I know when it comes to self-care and mental health, a big issue that comes up is college. Whether you're starting college or you're changing colleges or you're going back, college can be a very, very stressful time. Do you have any resources available to these older students?
Great question. So our program, the Student Assistance Program, which is all around the United States and is evidence-based, it's actually targeted specifically for something called early intervention and prevention. So that starts in elementary, middle school, and high school. So we ourselves do not have resources in higher education. However, I would always encourage parents and students to make sure that they are connected with their school counseling center. even before going into school. If you're already getting support, like through a treatment program or medication and or therapy or other kinds of interventions like that, those are great to keep intact and to transition into your college environment and still have resources like that. So to make sure you know where your wellness center is, where the counseling center is, where your academic supports are, and that way it can be hit the ground running with your social emotional supports, especially in a new environment like going off to college.
And so talking a little bit for parents, maybe of younger children, but besides those who maybe have come from a home where there was abuse or alcohol or drug abuse, how can parents know, I think my child might be a good candidate to speak with this counselor?
Honestly, I think any student, and so one of the things that we do just so you know, is at the beginning of the school year, our student assistance counselors actually go into classrooms, introduce themselves, let students know sort of what they're there for, how they can be an additional resource or support for them, what that can entail, where their office is located, which is huge because a lot of times, students don't know, or maybe that room has changed over the last couple years. So as far as being a candidate, I think any student would really benefit if they have a friend or someone in their lives who is starting, a peer group even that's starting to use drugs and alcohol, or if they just have questions, they might just have questions. They might have seen something on TV or on the internet and they just want to know more information. And sometimes students actually will work with our student assistance counselors. So I actually am a mentor for some students all around the state who do their senior project on things like substance abuse prevention, suicide prevention, emotional, and social emotional supports for students. So there's a lot of different. You don't need to be a student who's necessarily experimenting or in the throes of addiction in order to get the benefit of the support of the student assistance counselor. And then the last piece that we didn't actually mention, it's not just always one-on-one with students, is that our student assistance counselors go into classrooms and actually teach a specific evidence-based curriculum called the Prevention Education Series. So that's a number of different modules, and so then students actually get to learn information and then apply it in a fun, interactive way.
That's great, and it's definitely good to start young and get that education out there. So there is education, and kids know, like you mentioned about vaping. A lot of kids do say, oh well, juuling is fine. It's not as bad. I know when I was in high school, I knew a lot of people who used e-cigarettes, and they all said, well, it's fine. It's just water vapor. And I at the time I believed it as well. I never used it, but I believed that as well. Oh well, it's just harmless. It's just fun. So it's good to get that education out young.
It is, definitely. One of the other things that I think for parents, if you're thinking of supporting your child or have just questions on how can I really re-enter the school year with my child as a team, I would say really try to not overschedule, allow time for fun. You know better than anybody that leads to stress, and so if you're stressed and you're running here and there, your child's feeling that stress as well, and then if they get into the habit of overscheduling, then that becomes a lifestyle, and that's when students will come to us and say, I'm at the stress level of a 10, but maybe we haven't been kind of working with them on some coping skills at the 1, 2, 3 level, and now they're at 10 and they're experiencing academic challenges. And the other thing is try to encourage your child to get involved with at least one activity that's school sponsored. It doesn't need to be something super time consuming like I just was talking about, but just something, because you never know, there might be a connection that's made with that activity. And what we do know, the research shows us, is that connectedness is a protective factor for our students. So they might not be connected with a teacher or a certain subject, but they might be connected, in their extracurricular world with maybe another mentor or another student. So just allowing them to have that opportunity of outside the academic world of having some sort of connection is really powerful. There's a number of different things that parents can consider as they're going into the school year, but really just kind of being a partner and being a team in that school experience, and asking your child, what is something you're really excited about this year? And it's okay if they say that there's going to be a new lunch menu, or there's going to be a different technical kind of tool in the library, whatever they say. If they're excited about something, then go with that. It doesn't necessarily need to be purely academics. So there's, just have an open dialogue with your student. And if they come home from school, the number one thing they always say is, try not to say, how was your day at school? because that's such a broad, open-ended question. A lot of times kids just want to say, between 1 and 10, what was your school day like? Well, it was a 4. Then you can just kind of say, well, why was it a 4? What would have made it an 8? And then you can kind of go from there. But it's so overwhelming for somebody to say, what was your day like between 7 in the morning when you got on the bus and now it's 4:30 in the afternoon? So make it easy for them to answer that question.
That's really great. I know the classic, like, oh, it was good, and then that's the end of it, because there is just so much to put in. And going back a little bit to what you were saying about overscheduling, I know especially for high schoolers, that's a huge thing. Again, when I was in high school, there was the constant focus of, well, you need to have lots of stuff on your resume or you'll never get accepted to college, and you have to have 5 extracurriculars and all the great grades.
Yeah.
What would you say, not so much to a parent, but to a high schooler on finding that balance? Because of course you do want to take advantage of what's there, and you do want to expand yourself and get leadership opportunities, but how do you find that balance where you can also focus on you a little bit, focus on your mental health?
Yeah, and I would say that for parents, you know your child best, right? And then if there are certain academic expectations for the school year, maybe starting with those and then looking at, okay, how much time do we have during the day other than those academic sort of obligations for fun? So if your student, maybe they don't play on the soccer team at school, but they can be in a league outside of school, just something where they have an outlet that reduces stress, that they have fun, peer, just kind of like downtime. And that downtime can be reading a book, it could be being on the internet. I know a lot of times parents say they want to reduce screen time, which we should be reducing screen time. But if that's like a coping skill for a student to kind of be able to just sit, then that's okay. We want to encourage that. But as far as what you're asking, your child, and do check-ins. Like, hey, it's the first 3 weeks of school. How do you think it's going? Do you feel like you're doing too much? You have too much downtime? And then just kind of monitor that. And if you see that they start to take on too much, really just make sure they're able to manage that. And if not, what supports either in the school or you as parents can help them manage and maybe start to peel away some things that really aren't necessary.
That's great advice. And as we approach the school year, maybe for people starting, some kids who might be starting high school or going into middle school, or younger kids just get a little nervous about going back to school. How can we help our kids get past that? Ooh, end of summer, I'm a little nervous about going back to school feeling.
Yeah, I would say definitely leveraging things like if there's an open house, doing things with your student. Like there are students, and I just remember my own experience. I had a lot of trouble. I went to a school in Massachusetts, and we had lockers, and I had never had a locker before because the elementary school I went to didn't. So I couldn't remember my locker number, and I didn't really know how to use the locker. So maybe if taking advantage of things where they're doing those introductions into the school formally and making sure that your child is engaging in that. And if you already know that they've had some challenges, socially or just with nerves before, kind of right out of the gate, making sure that they're exposed to things and the people that can help them. So maybe they do forget their locker number. I don't even know if they have numbers anymore. I think they do. And then just making sure that they know who they can go to if they're, or having like a buddy, somebody else that can help them navigate that. So, but the other thing is that it's really normal. I would be surprised if kids weren't in some way nervous or a little bit of anxiety. Doesn't mean that they have an anxiety disorder, but they can be anxious without being in full-blown anxiety. And that's normal, right? That's kind of how our bodies prepare ourselves for different environments. So that's okay. But if you see that it's going on more than a couple weeks, that they're still not kind of settling in, and they're still, maybe they have tummy aches, or maybe they don't want to, fear of getting on the bus or different things, then that's an opportunity to maybe reach out to the school support team or to the classroom teacher and say, hey, I might need some help kind of transitioning my son or daughter to school this year. They're struggling. It's okay to ask for help.
Great, and I think that's the underlying theme of just it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to find someone
Yes.
to help. Well, thank you so much for coming in. We really do appreciate it. As we approach back to school time, it's great for parents and for students to know that these resources are available in Rhode Island schools, or you can reach out directly. So thanks so much, Leigh Reposa. She's here with Rhode Island Student Assistance Services.
Yes.
Thanks so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on again. I appreciate it.
And a happy back to school, everyone. And we'll be back in just a minute with our next guest here on GoLocal Live.